super awesome girlfriend Laura's back. And we are a few of the several hundred expats who live in the La Fortuna area. I'm just starting to film a bunch of videos about random stuff because I think that even though there's a lot of video out there on a lot of different websites about living and working here in Costa Rica, there could always be more. And in particular, there could be more of mine. On this one, I want to talk about whether or not it's more difficult or easier to start a business and to work down here. There's a lot, and I mean a lot, of videos that you can find online where people share their stories about how they got started and the challenges that they faced. And unfortunately, the majority of them suggest that it's so difficult down here. And you see a lot of interviews where people are saying, oh my God, if I had to do it over again, I would not do it. I would so not do it. I would start something in the US or Canada or whatever. And that's fine. I mean, some of my friends, many of my friends are in some of these videos. But I happen to completely disagree with them. And here's why. I'm not really sure how to say this without sounding like a bit of a jerk, but frankly, most of these people don't know what they're talking about. The majority of expats who come down here and start businesses don't have any experience in starting businesses before. They may have experience working in business. They may have been a business development specialist or a salesperson or head of HR, or they may have been a professional who had their own practice. They may have been a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or whatever. They may have driven a truck or something. So they may feel that because they were able to make a living and do well and save up some money, that they know how business works. And so they come down here and they find out that, okay, it's a bit of a challenge to start a new company. But then they come to the mistaken conclusion that it's harder to do it here than it is in North America. Well, I say North America, I mean Canada and the US. I don't have stats for Mexico. Just to tell you a little bit about my background, I have 20 years of experience consulting not only for Fortune 500 companies, but also for government and military in the United States and Canada. And I've also started, owned, and operated a number of businesses. Some of them did very well, and others did not. But unlike most of the interviews and videos that you see online with people talking about their opinion about whether or not it's hard or easy to start a business down here, I actually know what the hell I'm talking about. I have a background and a career that relates directly to business development. So before we get into any kind of significant detail, I just want to start by saying in North America, well, okay, Canada, US, 90% of new businesses fail. They don't reach the 5-year mark. And that's not the case down here. A much higher number of businesses succeed down here, and then I mean new businesses, than succeed in the United States and Canada. So I shouldn't really need to say anything other than that. The reasons why that's true are essentially, I mean, they may be interesting, but they're not even really necessary. Because the simple fact is the success rate here is substantially higher than it is in the US and Canada. Now, I am going to say a few of the reasons why that's true, because I like to talk, and I like to then watch the videos of myself talking after I've done it. So, let's start with the costs associated with operating a business. My super awesome, wonderful, sexy girlfriend Laura has made this graph for me. I'm going to come up here so that you can see it a little more closely. You see that? This part right here says raw materials and overhead. This part here says taxes and user fees. And this little part right here says gross profit. This is your sort of typical scenario in terms of expenses for a company, most companies actually, in North America. So, and this taxes and user fees side right here, and please ignore my barking dog on the patio. She's just very jealous about not being in this film. So you've got not just licensing fees, but you've got building permits, you've got government inspectors that have to be paid, you've got installation fees and certifications and And yes, licensing for let's say for instance you're starting a restaurant. You've got to get permits for the kitchen. That's all got to be approved. Your staff have to be certified, etc., etc. And then you've got to pay, excuse me. Then you've got to pay taxes, not just on what you make, but on everything that you buy as well. So that's why this slice of the pie is so high. Taxes and user fees are much larger than most people think they are. And of course, raw materials and overhead, I mean, that doesn't need a lot of explanation. You've got your, well, if you're a restaurant, then you've got raw shrimp, and you've got your rent, your lease, your, well, whatever else it is. You got to pay your minions and your insurance and all the rest of that. And so if you're lucky, let's say that this is a pizza, because it's round. And out of all of that, that's how much of the pizza you have to sell in order to pay those. That's how much of the pizza you have to sell to pay those. And that's how much of the sale price of the pizza you actually get to put in your pocket. Let's call that 10%. Now, what does that have to do with things being easier down here than they are in the US or Canada? Well, a few things. One, I did just a little bit of really simple math. Let's just take a quick look here at some of the math that I did. This, by the way, is not any specific set, math that, I'm not breaking down an actual company. But let's just say, as an example, you've got, as the business owner, you've got to pay a rent or mortgage $1,500 a month, utilities, cable, internet, water, sewage, whatever, another $500. Medical insurance, by the way, medical insurance is the second largest expense for homeowners in the US, which is a tragedy, but that's also the topic for another video. And that's $300 per person. And then you've got food, insurance for your home and your car, etc., etc. Let's call that $300. And then you've got other costs like transportation, Halloween costumes, cheese graters, fireworks, medical marijuana, heavy-duty stain removers, imported mustards, etc. All the usual typical stuff that, we all need to make up our lives. And that totals out at $3,600 a month. So, in order to get enough of these sold that the tiny little bit that's right here will equal $3,600 a month, let's just do this little math right here. $3,600 divided by so you've got to sell $72,000 worth of pizza in order to make your $3,600 a month profit. See, that's what that means. And that's pretty typical for a profit or gross profit breakdown in the US or Canada. And by the way, this does not include the tax on your income. Does not include income tax. So why is it so much easier and so much better to actually start a business down here? Well, imagine if you could take this part right here, the taxes and user fees part, and have that look more like this. So instead of it being almost 50% of what you're bringing in on each pizza, it's only this little bit. Look what that does to the amount of money that you actually make. It increases it by 4 times, which means that it reduces the number of pizzas that you have to sell by 3/4. So instead of having to sell $72,000 worth of pizzas, you only have to sell, times 0.25, $18,000 worth of pizzas. That makes a big, big difference. Now let's look at the other side of this expense thing right here. This raw materials and overhead bit. Well, what if you could get that to look like that? Instead of it being all the way up to there, what if it were only that bit right there? So if that were also reduced by 1/4, now instead of having to sell $18,000 worth of pizzas in order to pay for your $3,600 a month overhead, you would only have to pay, do the math yourself. I'm not doing everything for you. Suffice it to say, all of a sudden, you're literally having to generate less than $10,000 a month in order to meet your expenses. Now, here's where things get really interesting. That's pretty obvious, and you can email me or put some comments up if you need me to walk through that again. But it's pretty obvious how what the financial advantages are to doing business here if you can reduce your taxes and fees so much. And a lot of people watching this are going to be very skeptical, but I can just tell you right now, income tax here is a flat rate of 7% compared to a nominal rate of 30 whatever percent in the US and over 40% in Canada. That's a huge difference. And it's not just a difference that you benefit from, but it's on your own income, but it's a difference you benefit from on the amount that you have to pay to your employees as well, because those savings come right back to you. The same thing is true for your licensing fees. On this part here is so, a lot of people are going to be very skeptical, saying, how can you get your raw materials and overhead down so low? Well, the minimum wage down here is $2 an hour. How can it be so low? Because I'm living in this awesome place. This is my view, full of toucans, iguanas, sloths, hummingbirds, whatever, cathedral ceilings. This apartment is bigger than lots of people's houses, and I pay $400 a month in rent. My electrical bill, even with fans and air conditioning and all the rest of that, is less than $40 a month. I know people who have started companies and have been working away at them and doing very, very poorly at them for 5 years. But they have been able to stay in business because their monthly expenses are less than $1,000 a month. That's a huge competitive advantage. So one of the people, so when people say, oh my God, it's so difficult, it's so much more difficult than it is to start a business in the USA or Canada, frankly, they're full of crap. They don't know what they're talking about. If they had tried to start a business in the States, the way that I've seen them try to start businesses down here, they would have absolutely failed. They wouldn't have lasted 2 months. I mentioned the people that have been working on a travel advisory company for 5 years, that they wouldn't have lasted 5 weeks if they had been trying to do that in the States, because they don't know hardly anything about business. A very, very good friend of mine started a restaurant down here. Didn't even know the language, couldn't speak the language, but he got into the hospitality business. Made all sorts of mistakes, purchased things that he didn't need, etc., etc. Again, his rent on his entire restaurant was only $400 a month when he got it. You just simply couldn't do that in the US or Canada. And the list goes on and on and on and on. You got so many people that come down here, big dreams, big hopes, big ideas, and a lot of them succeed. It's a vastly higher number than the percentage of people who succeed when they try to set out for themselves in the US or Canada. So, excuse me, don't be fooled. It's great entertainment to watch people out there sharing their stories about why they came down, how they got started, what they wanted to do. And it's even great, it's educational when they talk about the challenges that they faced and where things got wrong and why they hated it so much and it's so frustrating. And there's a lot to learn from that, because there are such things as Tico time. It does take a lot longer to get things done down here than it does in North America. But you cannot argue with the math. And you can't argue with the reality that the cost of doing business down here is so much lower than it is in the US and Canada that it makes great sense to take a look at starting something down here. So that's my comment. That's my maybe 2 cents. Okay, really, that's more like my $2 on whether or not it's a good idea to start up down here in Costa Rica. And just sharing that with you so that you've got a bit of a balancing perspective compared to all the naysayers that are out there, who, many of whom have succeeded despite themselves and really don't know how lucky they are. Anyways, hope that helps, and feel free to get in touch if you have any questions. Ciao.